Once upon a time, in a beautiful castle far, far away, lived a lovely princess named Snow White. She had hair as dark as the night sky, lips as red as a cherry, and skin as white as freshly fallen snow. Snow White was as kind as she was beautiful, and all the little animals in the forest were her friends. In the same castle lived Snow White's stepmother, the queen. The queen was very beautiful too, but she had a cold heart. Every day she would look into her magical mirror and ask, "Magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" And every day the mirror would answer, "You, my queen, are the fairest of them all." This made the queen very happy. But as Snow White grew up, she became more and more lovely. One day the queen asked her mirror the same question, but this time the mirror's answer was different. It said, "My queen, you are fair, it is true, but Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you." The queen was filled with jealousy and became very angry. She decided she didn't want Snow White in the castle anymore. She called her royal huntsman and told him to take Snow White deep into the forest and leave her there. The huntsman had a kind heart and couldn't bear to harm the sweet princess. So he took Snow White into the woods and whispered, "Run away, dear princess. Find a safe place to hide and never come back to the castle." Snow White was frightened, but thanked the huntsman. She ran deep into the forest with tears in her eyes. The trees looked tall and spooky, but soon her little animal friends, birds, bunnies, and squirrels, came to comfort her. They led her through the winding paths until they came upon a clearing. In the middle of the clearing was a tiny, charming cottage. It looked like a doll's house. Who could live here? Snow White wondered. She knocked on the little door, but no one answered. The door creaked open, and she peeked inside. Everything was so small. There was a tiny table with 7 tiny chairs, 7 little plates, and 7 little cups. Upstairs, she found 7 little beds all in a row. The cottage was quite messy. The people who live here must need some help, Snow White thought. With a cheerful hum, she and her animal friends got to work. They washed the tiny dishes, swept the dusty floor, and tidied up the whole house until it sparkled. Feeling very tired from her long day, Snow White found the 7 little beds. She lay down across a few of them and quickly fell fast asleep. Later that day, the owners of the cottage came home. They were 7 dwarfs who worked all day in a nearby mine, digging for sparkling jewels. Their names were Doc, Grumpy, Happy, Sleepy, Bashful, Sneezy, and Dopey. When they saw their cottage door was open, they tiptoed inside. "Look, the house is clean," whispered Happy. "Someone's been eating from my bowl," grumbled Grumpy. They crept upstairs and saw the beautiful princess sleeping on their beds. "Who is she?" whispered Bashful, hiding behind Doc. Just then, Snow White woke up. She was a little startled to see 7 little men staring at her, but she smiled kindly. "Oh, hello," she said softly. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." "My name is Snow White," she told them her sad story, and the dwarfs' hearts were filled with pity. "You can stay with us," said Doc. The others all agreed, even Grumpy, though he just huffed a little. Hooray! They all cheered. So Snow White lived with the 7 dwarfs. Every morning they would go off to work in the mines, and they would call out, "Goodbye, Snow White. Be careful while we're gone." Snow White would wave back and spend her day cooking delicious soups, baking pies, and keeping the cottage neat and cozy. In the evenings, they would all sing songs, dance, and tell stories. Snow White had never been happier. She loved her 7 new friends very much. Meanwhile, back at the castle, the evil queen asked her magic mirror again. "Magic mirror on the wall, "Who's the fairest one of all?" The mirror replied, "Over the 7 jeweled hills, beyond the 7th fall, in the cottage of the 7 dwarfs, Snow White is the fairest of them all." The queen was furious. She realized Snow White was still alive. Using her dark magic, she disguised herself as an old woman selling apples. One of the apples was special. It was a wishing apple, bright red and shiny, but it was enchanted to make whoever took a bite fall into a deep, deep sleep. The queen traveled to the dwarf's cottage. Snow White was baking a pie when she heard a knock at the window. She saw a kind-looking old woman. "Hello, my dear," the queen said in a crackly voice. "Would you like to try one of my delicious wishing apples? Just make a wish and take a bite." Snow White remembered the dwarf's warning to not talk to strangers. But the old woman seemed so harmless, and the apple looked so tasty. "It does look wonderful," she said. I wish for my friends, the dwarfs, to be safe and happy always." She took a small bite of the shiny red apple. Instantly, Snow White fell to the floor in a deep, magical sleep. The wicked queen cackled, her plan a success, and she hurried away. When the 7 dwarfs came home that evening, they found Snow White lying still on the floor. They were heartbroken. They called her name, but she wouldn't wake up. They gently lifted her and placed her in a beautiful glass bed they made, so they could always watch over her. They surrounded it with flowers and stood vigil, day and night, hoping for a miracle. One day, a charming prince from a nearby kingdom was riding through the forest. He had heard stories of a beautiful princess with skin as white as snow. He saw the glass bed and the grieving dwarfs. When he saw Snow White, he knew it was the princess from the stories. He was so captivated by her beauty and peacefulness that he leaned down, gave her a gentle kiss. As soon as his lips touched hers, the magic spell was broken. Snow White's eyes fluttered open. She sat up and smiled. The dwarfs cheered with joy. Happy was laughing. Doc was hugging Grumpy, and Dopey was doing a silly dance. Snow White and the prince looked at each other and knew they were meant to be. The prince asked Snow White to come with him to his castle and be his princess. Snow White happily agreed. But first she gave each of her dear dwarfs a big hug and a kiss on the cheek. "I will never forget you," she promised. And so Snow White went with the prince to his magnificent castle, where they lived happily ever after. She visited her 7 best friends in their little cottage often, and their friendship and laughter filled the forest for all the years to come. Thank you so much for listening to our story tonight. We hope you enjoyed it and have the sweetest of dreams. If you'd like to hear more gentle stories like this one, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Good night, little dreamers.